hands, and the first good hands I'm going to leave you with are very distinguished, a man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway, John Holdren. John is known to you most as the longest-serving President's Science Advisor and Director of OSTP, from whose nomination was announced before President Obama even took office, and who turned out the lights in the White House as everyone was departing at the end of Obama's term. But before that, he had originally spent 23 years on the faculty at Berkeley before moving to Harvard to take up a faculty position there. Immediately before becoming President's Science Advisor, he spent 4 years as president of the Woods Hole Research Center, where he was very strongly engaged in the interface between policy and science, which was, of course, a perfect training for his job in the White House. He currently holds 3 affiliations at Harvard with the Kennedy School, with the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, and with the Earth and Planetary Sciences Department, which for any of you who are faculty members know that means way too many faculty meetings. John also has a very long and distinguished career of bipartisan work. I'll just name one example. He co-chaired the National Commission on Energy Policy with 2 Republican co-chairs. And he also has, of course, a very long and distinguished history in the policy arena. His very first congressional testimony was before some of you were born. It was in 1969 when he testified on the need for an Office of Technology Assessment, back in '69. So, with no further ado, John Holdren.
Well, thank you very much, Marcia, and thanks to all of you for coming. I see so many old friends in the room. It's a double pleasure to be here. And by the way, I will be staying all day, no matter how many emails I get urging the contrary. I want to offer at the start of today's conversation a few thoughts about the intersection of science, technology, and innovation with public policy. Thoughts that I hope the folks engaging with the Day One project, this really very ambitious and potentially very influential project, will have in mind as the effort moves ahead. The first thought is that science, technology, and innovation have really major roles to play in surmounting virtually every challenge that our society faces, virtually every challenge on the national agenda. National security, economic progress, protecting a healthy and healthful environment, improving and making available across society the drugs, the vaccines, the therapies, and the lifestyle choices that keep disease at bay, upgrading our energy, transportation, and communications infrastructure, navigating the tensions among security, efficiency, convenience, and privacy. And by no means least important, educating our youth with the tools and the understandings they're going to need to keep our democracy functional in an increasingly complex and high-tech world. The second thought is that all of these challenges are interconnected. Achieving our national potential on any of them requires making important progress on all of the others. And besides being interconnected, they are both individually and together interdisciplinary, intersectoral, intergenerational, and in some respects, international. They're interdisciplinary in the sense that insights from natural and social science, from the humanities, from the arts, from engineering, from law, insights from all of those domains are essential even to understand the nature of the challenges we face, never mind essential in fashioning solutions. They are intersectoral in the sense that collaboration among the levels of government, state, local, national, the sectors of the economy, the private sector, the academic sector, the civil society sector, and government, all of that has to come together if we are really to realize the potential of our society to meet this array of challenges. Interconnected in the sense that you need a strong economy to protect the environment. You need both to protect national security. You need education to maintain the capacity to adequately address all of these challenges. And to a very considerable extent, of course, they are intergenerational. We absolutely need the collaboration of our younger generation, of our older generation, of which I am now a member, as you might have deduced from the fact that I gave my first testimony to Congress 50 years ago. And in many respects, we need collaboration across nations. Think of combating disease, addressing ocean pollution, getting our arms around global climate change, advancing fundamental science in a world where no country has a monopoly on scientific genius. Even national security in its narrowest sense can no longer be secured entirely by strictly national means. So we need partnerships. And the third thought is that the needed partnerships absolutely have to include partnerships across our political parties and across the diverse factions within them. The challenges I've listed are fundamentally non-partisan. The desirability of surmounting them should be clear to people all across the political spectrum, and the benefits of surmounting them will accrue to our entire society. Political parties and factions within them may differ, they do differ, on the best ways to make progress, on the appropriate roles of local, state, and federal government, on how large and how strong government needs to play its proper roles in interaction with the private sector and with civil society, and on where, what kinds, and how much international engagement is appropriate. But I think no reasonable person can disagree on the need to work together in navigating these differences so that forward progress is possible. The fourth thought has to do with how science, engineering, and innovation interact with each other and with public policy, obviously a matter at the core of the agenda of the Day One project. I think it's probably clear to everybody by now that the progression from fundamental research to applied research to development to demonstration to widespread diffusion, where only the last signals true success with innovation, that progression is not a linear pipeline, but a web of feedbacks. And that, too, is a compelling call for partnerships. If the linkages and symbioses among those different stages of the path to full and successful innovation are to be fully exploited. The role of public policy in this entails, number one, playing the central role in supporting fundamental research, about which basic economic considerations tell us that the private sector will never do as much fundamental research as the interests of society require. It involves supporting applied research and development in concert with the private sector in domains where public goods and the public interest dictate a government role. It includes incubating collaborative partnerships to address compelling opportunities. It includes leveraging the resources of science and technology-heavy federal agencies to support science, technology, engineering, and math education across the nation and across educational levels from preschool to grad school. It also entails shaping, and this is no less important than the other functions. It entails shaping the intellectual property environment, the tax environment, the regulatory environment, the international collaboration environment, and high skills immigration in ways that support and enable the work of the private, academic, and civil society sectors. We are all embedded in a network of opportunities, of challenges, of symbioses. And to get it right, we are going to need increased recognition of the way all of these interests are tied together, the symbioses that exist, the opportunities that can be enhanced by partnerships. If I think back over the greatest achievements of science and technology policy over the last 50 years in which I've been paying close attention, virtually all of them were achieved through partnerships between government, the private sector, civil society, academia. Virtually all of them. I won't take up your time with a list, but make your own. Figure it out. Partnerships have been essential, and they're going to continue to be essential. The Day One Project, the Leadership Council for which I have the honor to co-chair, and I'm going to give something away here, to co-chair with Susan Eisenhower, that choice underscoring the nonpartisan nature of this effort, is all about this set of opportunities that exist to enhance our capacity to collaborate, to enhance the role of the federal government in all of the dimensions that I have described. I was persuaded to take on this task as co-chair of the Leadership Council because I am convinced that there is a big opportunity and that the opportunity has been intelligently addressed in the founding principles of the Day One Project, of how the project is going to reach out to the widest possible community to develop the best ideas through which the government can advance our collective societal interest by applying science, technology, and innovation to the great challenges we face. And to educate a new generation of future leaders in policy advice and policy making in these domains. The other single most important lesson that I have learned in 50 years of playing in this arena is that individuals matter. Just as every one of the major successes that one can describe at the intersection of science and technology and innovation with public policy over the last 5 decades can be ascribed to the success of partnerships, so also can they be ascribed to the energy, the determination, the commitment of individuals who moved those ideas and those projects forward. And so it is going to be a major component of the Day One Project to identify and bring to the attention of government the young stars who are going to move so many of these issues forward. And with that, I am going to conclude my opening remarks and invite Daniel Correa up here to harass me a little.
Well, thank you so much, John, for sharing those reflections, both on a career but also a forward-looking perspective on how a nonpartisan endeavor can make an important impact here on science, tech, and innovation policy. You mentioned that you've agreed to step forward and co-chair this initiative with Susan Eisenhower, who I'm sure everyone here knows, who's a luminary and expert on a number of science and tech and innovation topics, particularly in the realm of national security and energy. John, can you just talk a little bit about your decision to take an active role at a time like this and why you think nonpartisanship is so critical here?
Well, I think, again, that it's clear to everybody that we have been suffering to a degree from a lack of bipartisanship in our national government's activities. That's not to say that nothing is working. There are a variety of important initiatives that are being pushed forward under the leadership of Kelvin Drogemeyer, now Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, initiatives related to information technology, to autonomous vehicles, to cybersecurity, to artificial intelligence. There are very important projects going forward at NASA, at NOAA, in the Department of Energy, for example. But in some other domains, our capacities, our determination, our focus, these things have been eroded. And I believe we have an opportunity not only to restore bipartisanship and the preeminence of good ideas and the determination to exploit them in the national interest, an opportunity to inject and infect this domain with new energy, with new ideas. And I believe that it's possible to do it in a way that will engage folks across the political spectrum. I think many of us have our individual ideas about how we hope the November election will come out, but whichever way it comes out, I think there will be an opportunity at the beginning of what will be, either way, a new administration in some sense, to put on the table and before the leaders, not just in the White House, but the leaders in Congress and the leaders across the departments and agencies, a set of opportunities that they will find difficult to resist in terms of advancing a nonpartisan agenda through which science, technology, innovation, and public policy in support of it can advance our national goals.
Thank you very much for that. So just to build on this point, which I think is really articulates the founding principles behind the Day One project, we're sharing today for the first time that we are articulating an ambitious goal to gather and to disseminate 100 compelling ideas across science and technology policy over the coming year. It's an ambitious agenda that John, Susan, I, and the staff and the rest of the Leadership Council are excited to take on. But in so doing, we are not necessarily endorsing any particular perspective. We are instead providing a platform to help a broad, democratized set of experts and advocates to develop their own ideas. And part of the announcements we're making today, in addition to articulating that initial goal, we are releasing an initial set of 15 such proposals, many of the authors of which are here with us today and eager to share some of their ideas. And these folks represent a wide variety of perspectives.
That's absolutely right, and I think it's important to emphasize that we will be putting forward a menu. And from that menu, different choices may be made depending on the flavor of the next administration. But our aim is to have a menu so rich with enticing and potentially very powerful options that no matter what the flavor of the next administration, at least a significant fraction of the ideas on that menu will come to fruition.
And I also want to return to this point that John made in his remarks, and I think Marcia also touched on, which is, while there's certainly a great deal to come, John, you're at a period of reflecting on 50 years of engagement in science policymaking. There are a number of folks that we are reaching through the Day One project, assembled here, live streaming, and as well across the broader community, who are maybe just beginning on their journey into policymaking across science and technology, eager to tackle some big compelling challenge, or because they have an idea or they think there's a key opportunity that we're as a society not addressing. What advice would you give as you reflect back on your time in this world?
Well, I guess number one, that's a big that's a
In
big
just a few
order.
minutes.
That's a big order, and I have 2 minutes. I would first of all emphasize that people need to understand and believe, young people need to understand and believe that individuals still matter, that it is possible to make a significant difference as an individual. There are so many people in this room who have done exactly that. So many people in this room with whom I've worked over different periods in that 50 years who have made a difference by their own commitment, their own engagement, their own creativity, and understanding that quitting at the first sign of an obstacle is not the path to succeed. It takes determination, it takes endurance, it takes a relentless focus on the goal. The second thing I would note is that the capacity to communicate new ideas or improved old ones clearly is terribly important. I spend a lot of time with my students just working on their capacity to write a good 2-page memo. This, in my own career, I think has been immensely important. I have often obtained access and obtained positions, obtained podiums, because people had the impression that I could explain clearly what the science behind a new proposition was, what the merits were, what the counter-arguments were, and again, I think if you review the degrees of success and failure over decades of efforts by many people on science, technology, and public policy, you will find that one of the things that was determinative in many cases was the capacity of advocates for a particular position, for a particular new idea, to explain it clearly and persuasively. The third piece of advice is, while you recognize that as an individual you can have an impact, that you can be a big deal, you should also recognize that many other people are going to be important to success. And it is, I think, very important to treat every person with whom you interact as a potential asset, as an intelligent person capable of both understanding and perceiving which ideas are good ideas and which ideas are not so good, a person capable of helping you. I mean, one of the things I found out in the White House, when I went to the White House full-time to work with President Obama, there were a lot of people I was working with who were younger than my kids. But it would have been a very dumb assumption to assume that those people younger than my kids were not fully formed, brilliant, effective, influential analysts. Consider everybody a potential partner until they prove otherwise. A few will prove otherwise, but you will do a lot better if you build partnerships as an individual, as well as building partnerships in the various dimensions that I already discussed.
Amen. Can I ask a question that's just on a particular, some specifics of the policy areas you might be excited about that you think, just to give a little preview of some domains we might tackle? If you had your druthers, John, where would you like to see a set of compelling proposals on particular topics across the broad expanse of science and technology policy?
That's another big order, but let me mention a few. One, I think in the domain of the intersection of science and technology with public health, there remain enormous challenges and enormous opportunities. We are by no means past the threat of influenza pandemics. We are not adequately prepared. Many administrations have worked on that problem. None have succeeded in doing enough to protect society from another 2018 flu in which millions of people would perish. None have so far done enough to address the challenge of combating antibiotic resistance. This is a potential scourge. The fact that there are bugs against which we have maybe one remaining antibiotic that works. And if that one fails through the continuing evolution of the bugs, which is a process ongoing, if that fails, we could have a public health catastrophe. Much more effort is needed in that domain. I think few people in this room will be shocked to learn that I think the challenge at the intersection of energy, land use, and climate change is immensely important. And it demands inputs from every sector of society, not just in understanding the opportunities and implementing the opportunities for reducing the offending emissions, but also for building resilience, for preparedness and adaptation to reduce the damages from changes in climate that can no longer be avoided. This, by the way, is an idea that is now catching the interest and the attention of the private sector in the United States. Big financial companies, big energy companies, big manufacturing companies are all coming to realize that they need to look at the energy, climate, land use challenge not just as a challenge, but as an opportunity, and that there are enormous advances that are possible in the domain of coping with this very challenging intersection. And we're going to get those challenges met, in my judgment, by the way, not by demonizing the private sector, but by working with the private sector. In one of the ancient history aspects of my engagement in this field, more than 25 years ago, I wrote for a number of different politicians some paragraphs on the intersection of public and private interest in environmental issues. And what I said in those paragraphs was that the great problems of the environment are not going to be solved over the dead bodies of the private sector. They're going to be solved when companies figure out that the companies and the countries that learn how to meet the needs that people have and that people feel, meet those needs in ways that are energy saving and climate sparing, those are the companies and the countries that are going to prosper. I think that's extremely important. I also think there's an immensely important set of issues that remain before us at the intersection of information technology, artificial intelligence, security, and privacy. Navigating the tensions across those domains, the tensions that exist across security, convenience, openness, privacy, those are very challenging tensions. And again, they will not be successfully addressed without a significant contribution from creativity in science, technology, and innovation. That's a big one.
Thanks. That is a compelling and expansive list of urgent priorities.
And I could add more.
In the interest of time, I think we're gonna close out that question. So, one of the things that you mentioned, I want to make sure to highlight for the audience, is the importance of packaging your ideas in a compelling way, so that it's ready, so that somebody can take action on it. I know this is something that you preach with your students. I think this is a core differentiator and a core vision of what the Day One Project is trying to accomplish, is that we begin with a policymaker customer in mind and think about how we can arm them with what they need in order to tackle some of the big challenges that you're talking about. So could you share a little bit more about how you think about the policymaker as a customer and your experience on both sides, as somebody who's been across sectors, purchased in academia, as well as a senior policymaker role?
That's another great question. One of the things that I have learned over the years is that in persuading policymakers that a new idea is a good idea and worth the support of the policymaker, it's very important to think about that individual's particular interest. For what is that policymaker responsible? How does that policymaker judge success? What is success in their terms? And then bring to bear people with whom that policymaker can identify as relevant to that policymaker's goals. I'll give you one example. During the course of the Clinton administration, I was a member of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. And one of the studies that President Clinton asked us to launch was a study of the federal role in energy technology innovation. We constructed the committee to do that study in a very deliberately bipartisan and multi-sectoral way. We had Republicans, we had Democrats, we had leaders of major energy companies, we had leaders of major civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, like the Environmental Defense Fund, the Natural Resources Defense Council, all on that committee. And when it came time to market the recommendations, we brought to meetings with members of Congress, we brought to meetings with cabinet secretaries and their deputies the subset of the members of that committee who were most germane to that policymaker's interest. And so we made a quite extraordinary degree of progress, given that the report and its recommendations originated from a Democratic administration, by bringing Republican members of the committee, industrial leaders from the committee, to meet with Republican members of Congress to advocate the results. And as a result, we were able to get a very substantial proportion of those recommendations through the United States Congress. First, we had to get it through, by the way, the government's own agencies. We had to persuade the Office of Management and Budget because a big price tag was associated. We had to persuade the Department of Energy. We had to persuade NOAA and NASA and NSF. But again, in all those persuasions, which preceded the work to persuade the Congress, we did this process of figuring out what are the interests of each interlocutor and to whom is that interlocutor most likely to listen concerning the merits of our recommendation. It worked.
It's an inspiring story, and it's one that sets the bar particularly high for our work over the coming year, but something that we will try to attain. So we're going to have to leave it there. As we wrap up, I just wanted to reflect, just to remind folks of the announcements that we're making today as the Day One Project. 3 things. 1, we're launching formally and embarking on this agenda over the coming year to democratize the policymaking process and gather 100 compelling science and tech and innovation policy ideas. We're announcing the fact that John Holdren and Susan Eisenhower have stepped forward to co-chair this initiative. We're releasing an initial set of 15 proposals that represent a down payment on our goal of 100, and we'll be featuring a number of those here today. And then finally, we're issuing an open call for anyone to participate and contribute their idea through the Day One Accelerator, which is live now on our website. You can go dayoneproject.org, submit your idea. We're going to be picking a cohort of up to 25 who we will join on a 25-day sprint to help them refine their ideas and develop them into compelling policy proposals and pitch them to policymakers for action. So that's a lot of action that we're up to. It wouldn't be possible without the team we have assembled at the Day One Project, which consists of Josh Shoup, Aaron Zollman, and Eric Martin, who have more than anything been responsible for us being here today and this effort kicking off in such a successful light. So please join me in thanking them right now. We've got an exciting agenda today. We're going to talk about 4 themes. The first is catalytic partnerships. Partnerships across sectors, across ideological divides, as well as across different domains and even branches. 2, we're going to talk about life sciences and health. 3, we're going to feature a series of fireside chats and discussions on connecting research to policymaking. And then we're going to close out the day with some discussions on innovation, growth, and competitiveness. So we're excited for what's to come and the ideas that will be shared throughout the day. And now we're going to go to break, and we'll be back at 10:30 to kick off our first track.